Sometimes, life humbles a man so deeply that the world forgets his worth. But destiny has a way of lifting the forgotten, and kindness has a way of returning when least expected. This is the story of a man who lost everything, only to rise higher than anyone ever imagined. The morning sun over Lagos was already harsh, beating down on the streets like a whip. Danfoss honked impatiently, Okada riders zigzagged recklessly, and hawkers with trays balanced on their heads shouted the prices of gala, sachet water, and puff-puff. In the middle of all that chaos, Akinwale Johnson pressed his worn brown folder tightly against his chest. Inside that folder were copies of his CV, certificates, and one carefully ironed shirt he had been saving for this day. Today was not just any day, it was his chance to finally escape the endless cycle of rejection. He had secured an interview at Balogun Holdings, one of the biggest firms in Lagos. If he got this job, he told himself, he could finally support his widowed mother and younger sister. Sweat trickled down his forehead as he glanced at his cheap wristwatch. He had only 40 minutes left. "I must not be late," he muttered, weaving through the crowd. Then, just as he turned onto a busy street near Marina, he heard a cry. "Ah! Somebody please help me." A well-dressed woman in her early 30s had stumbled near the gutter. One of her high heels had snapped completely. Her handbag scattered open, spilling cosmetics and a small notepad onto the rough pavement. People glanced at her but moved on. Lagos was too busy for sympathy. Akinwale slowed down. His heart thumped. He had no time to waste. But when his eyes met hers, he saw panic and embarrassment. She whispered under her breath, "How will I even enter my meeting like this?" For a moment, his mind battled between ambition and compassion. He remembered his mother's words in Yoruba, "Ore ki ku," kindness never dies. With a sigh, he stepped closer. "Madam, let me help you." The woman looked up, surprised. "Are you sure? You seem to be in a hurry." "I am," Akinwale admitted, "but you need help more than I need speed." Together, they gathered her things. She tested her broken heel and shook her head. "This is a disaster. I have an important presentation. If I go like this, they won't even listen to me." "Don't worry," Akinwale said. "There's a shoe repair stand by the junction." They hurried to a roadside cobbler. The cobbler inspected the shoe, shaking his head. "Madam, this one don't die. No gum can hold it. You need new shoes." The woman groaned. "Where can I find shoes around here?" "Balogun Market," the cobbler replied, "just across the road." Akinwale hesitated. Time was flying, but when he saw the woman's worried face, he forced a smile. "Let's go. I know the way." At the market, traders shouted prices as they pushed through narrow aisles lined with shoes. Akinwale helped her try on several pairs until she settled on elegant black heels. She reached into her bag, then frowned. "Oh no, I didn't bring enough cash." Akinwale looked at her, then at his transport money, the last note he had for his journey to the interview. Slowly, he placed it in the trader's hand. "Please, add this. She must not be late." The woman's eyes widened. "Why would you do that for me? You don't even know me." He shrugged, adjusting his folder. "It's nothing. Just make sure you succeed in your meeting." She smiled softly. "Thank you. What is your name?" "Akinwale," he said, already glancing at his watch. He was 20 minutes late. By the time he reached Balogun Holdings, panting and drenched in sweat, the receptionist looked at him apologetically. "I'm sorry, sir. The interview has ended. The position was given to Mr. Tunde Martins. He came early." Akinwale's shoulders slumped. His chest felt hollow, like someone had snatched his future away. He turned to leave, but the receptionist leaned forward and whispered, "Wait. There's a janitor opening. The pay is small, but at least you'll be inside the company. Do you want it?" Akinwale stared at her, torn between shame and desperation. His dreams of being an economist seemed shattered, but his mother's voice echoed again. Ore ki ku. He nodded slowly. Yes, I'll take it. As he signed the form for the janitor role, he muttered under his breath, If this is where destiny wants me to start, then so be it. The next morning, Akinwale reported for duty as a janitor at Belogan Holdings. His heart felt heavy as he picked up the green apron and mop that were now his new tools. The same building he had once imagined entering in a fine suit now welcomed him as the one who would clean its floors. He moved quietly across the grand lobby. The marble floor reflected the light of the chandeliers, the air smelled of polished wood, and everywhere around him, men in suits and women in heels walked with purpose. Yet here he was, holding a mop. Whispers followed him. Two secretaries passed by and lowered their voices. Isn't that the young man who came for the interview yesterday? One asked. Yes, the other replied with a faint laugh. Now he is a janitor. Life can be so cruel. Akinwale heard them, but he kept his head down. He remembered his mother's words, Ore ki ku, kindness never dies. He told himself this humiliation would not last forever. As he continued sweeping, a familiar voice echoed across the lobby. Tunde Martins, the man who had taken the position meant for him, walked in wearing a navy blue suit, his shoes polished to a shine. He carried himself with arrogance, trailed by a junior staff with files stacked in her hands. Tunde's eyes lit up when he saw Akinwale. A smile curved his lips, sharp as a knife. Well, look who we have here, the latecomer. Yesterday you wanted to be my colleague, and today you are polishing floors. He paused deliberately, then dropped a used tissue on the ground. Be useful, cleaner. Pick that up. And if you have time, you can come and shine my shoes. At least that way, you will learn what punctuality means. The junior staff giggled. Akinwale bent down, picked up the tissue without a word, and resumed cleaning. Every muscle in his body wanted to respond, but he swallowed his anger. Later that afternoon, while dusting tables in one of the smaller offices, he noticed an open file. He could not help glancing at the figures and graphs inside. His trained eyes immediately spotted errors, confusing net profit with operating profit, ignoring inflation sensitivity. His heart clenched. This kind of mistake can ruin a whole project, he whispered. Just then the door opened, and in walked Funke Williams, the very woman he had helped on the street with her broken heel. She stopped short when she saw him by her desk. What are you doing with those documents? She demanded. Startled, Akinwale stepped back. I'm sorry, madam. I was only cleaning. Her eyes narrowed. Then clean and leave the files alone. You are a janitor, nothing more. Something in Akinwale stirred. He straightened his shoulders, his voice calm but steady. With respect, madam, the calculations in this report are wrong. If it is presented this way, the company may suffer a huge loss. Funke froze, shocked. No one dared speak to her like that, least of all a janitor. Before she could reply, the door swung open again. Tunde Martins entered briskly. What is going on here? He asked sharply, his gaze landing on Akinwale. Why is this cleaner standing so close to your documents? I was cleaning, Akinwale replied evenly. Tunde sneered. Do not act smart. Stay in your place. If I ever see you near company files again, you will be thrown out. Akinwale's jaw tightened. He looked him straight in the eye. You may see me as a janitor, but I know numbers better than you think. Funke quickly raised her hand. Enough, both of you. Her eyes lingered on Akinwale longer than she intended. Something about his confidence unsettled her. Later, when the office was quiet, Funke returned to where Akinwale was arranging his cleaning tools. Her voice was lower now, almost hesitant. You said the figures were wrong. How could you possibly know that? Akinwale looked at her calmly. Because I understand them. These are not ordinary numbers to me. She studied him closely. Who exactly are you, Mr. Johnson? He paused, his voice firm but low. I am more than just a janitor, madam. Much more. Funke could not shake off Akinwale's words. I am more than just a janitor, madam. Much more. That night, while driving home through the busy streets of Victoria Island, his voice echoed in her mind. She had dismissed him earlier, but there had been certainty in his tone. A certainty she did not expect from someone in a janitor's uniform. The next morning, she arrived at the office before most of the staff. As she entered her department, she found Akinwale already at work, wiping the glass doors. His green apron hung neatly, and his mop bucket stood in the corner. But instead of moving away when she appeared, he remained steady, his eyes calm. Mr. Johnson, she began slowly, yesterday you claimed the figures in my report were wrong. What exactly did you mean? Akinwale placed his cloth aside. The report assumed net profit without adjusting for inflation. That makes the projections unrealistic. Investors will see through it. Her eyebrows rose. How do you know this? I studied economics at the University of Ibadan, he said simply. Second class upper. I have written papers on risk analysis, investment returns, and project sensitivity. But life turned, and here I am. Funke stared at him in silence. She could hardly believe it. His explanation was sharp, clear, and more precise than many junior analysts she had worked with. Show me, she said at last, sliding the file toward him. Akinwale hesitated, then pulled out a pen. He began to write, breaking down the errors and recalculating margins. He spoke with quiet authority, explaining IRR, NPV, and risk models as if they were second nature. Funke leaned over, following every word. By the time he finished, the messy figures had become a clear, logical roadmap. She exhaled. You are right, she admitted softly. Before either of them could say more, the door opened. Tunde Martins stepped in, holding a cup of coffee. His eyes fell on Akinwale, seated at the desk with the file. His expression turned hard. What nonsense is this? Tunde snapped. Cleaner, who gave you permission to touch official documents? Funke stood quickly. Relax, Tunde. He was only pointing out. Pointing out? Tunde cut her off, his voice dripping with contempt. This man is a janitor. He should be scrubbing floors, not pretending to be an economist. Do not waste your time with him, Funke. He knows nothing. Akinwale rose to his feet, his voice calm. Sir, with respect, I know more than you think. The report you submitted yesterday had mistakes. If it reaches Chief Balogan like that, the project will collapse. The color drained slightly from Tunde's face, but he masked it with a laugh. You hear him, Funke? A janitor teaching me finance? Ridiculous. He stepped closer, lowering his tone. Stay in your place, cleaner, before you lose even this small job. He stormed out, slamming the door. Funke turned back to Akinwale, her eyes filled with questions. Do not mind him, she said quietly. Tell me more. For the next 30 minutes, Akinwale explained alternative models of profitability. He spoke about sensitivity analysis, showing how a 10% shift in costs could affect the entire projection. Funke listened, astonished at his clarity. She began to see him not as a janitor, but as someone who truly belonged in that office. Finally, she leaned back, her expression unreadable. Mr. Johnson, you must promise me something. Do not let anyone else know about this conversation, not yet. Just keep doing your work quietly, but when the time comes, I may need you. Akinwale nodded slowly. As you wish, madam. But remember, truth cannot stay hidden forever. That evening, as he left the building, Akinwale walked past Tunde in the lobby. Tunde gave him a cold smile. Enjoy your mop, janitor. That is the highest you will ever rise here. Akinwale met his gaze without flinching. We shall see, he said simply, and walked out into the fading Lagos light. Upstairs, Funke stood by her window watching him leave. She whispered to herself, "This man is not ordinary. One day, everyone will see it." By the middle of the week, the air inside Balogun Holdings carried tension you could almost touch. Everyone had heard the rumor. Chief Balogun himself was coming. The man was a legend in Lagos business circles, tough, brilliant, and merciless with mistakes. Entire departments had been dissolved after one bad presentation in front of him. Funke spent the morning polishing her slides and rewriting figures. Tunde Martins walked around, boasting loudly. "This is my chance to prove I was the right choice. By the time Chief Balogun sees my work, he will know I'm the future of this company." Some staff nodded politely, though most rolled their eyes when his back was turned. Meanwhile, Akinwale quietly mopped the corridors, invisible to most. Yet his mind was not on his mop. He had seen Tunde's report again that morning and noticed glaring errors. He wanted to say something, but knew if he spoke, it would only bring insults. Still, he whispered under his breath, "Oto ki bo. Truth cannot be covered forever." At exactly 11 a.m., black SUVs rolled into the compound. Men in dark suits stepped out first, then finally Chief Balogun emerged. He was tall, his agbada flowing, his cap set firmly on his head. His eyes were sharp, the kind that measured a man in one glance. The boardroom filled quickly. Directors, managers, and senior staff all rose to greet him. Even Tunde, usually arrogant, adjusted his tie nervously. Akinwale was outside the boardroom, sweeping the hallway, but through the open door he could hear everything. Chief Balogun sat at the head of the table, his deep voice commanding silence. "I have come to hear about this new project," he said. "Let us begin." Tunde stood confidently and began his presentation. He clicked through slides, pointing at graphs and figures. His voice was smooth at first, but then Chief Balogun leaned forward. "You said the internal rate of return is 18%. How did you arrive at that figure?" Tunde froze for a moment. By calculating the net profits, sir." The chief's eyes narrowed. "Net profit? And what about inflation? Sensitivity to cost variation? Did you run a scenario analysis?" Tunde's voice faltered. "Not exactly, sir. But the profit margin is strong." "Strong?" Chief Balogun cut him off sharply. "You call this analysis? This is shallow. My secondary school son could do better." The room went silent. A few directors shifted uncomfortably in their seats. Sweat broke out on Tunde's forehead as he stammered, "Sir, if you give me more time." "I gave you time already," Chief Balogun thundered. He looked around the table. "Who prepared this nonsense?" Tunde swallowed hard. I did, sir." From the back of the room, Funke's hand twitched. Her eyes drifted to the corridor, where she knew Akinwale was standing. She remembered his calm voice. "The figures are wrong." Her heart pounded. Slowly she stood. "Sir," she said carefully, "with your permission, there is someone who can explain this better." The chief turned his piercing eyes on her. "Who?" Funke hesitated, then spoke firmly. "Akinwale Johnson." Confused murmurs filled the room. A few people frowned. "The janitor," someone whispered. Chief Balogun's gaze hardened. "Bring him in." Every head turned toward the door as Akinwale stepped into the boardroom, green apron still tied around his waist, mop abandoned in the corridor. He bowed slightly. "Good morning, sir," he said. The chief's eyes scanned him slowly, then he gestured toward the projector. "You, if you know what you claim, explain this report to me." Now Akinwale stepped forward. His hands were steady as he picked up the marker. On the whiteboard, he began to write, breaking down the true net present value, explaining risk adjustments and how a 10% rise in cost could change the entire picture. His voice was calm, clear, and precise. The boardroom watched in stunned silence. Even those who had mocked him earlier leaned forward, their pens frozen above their notepads. When he finished, Akinwale set down the marker. "That is the reality of this project, sir. Anything less is deception." Chief Balogan leaned back slowly in his chair. For the first time, a small smile tugged at the corners of his lips. "You," he said, his voice low but powerful. "Who exactly are you?" All eyes were fixed on Akinwale as he stood by the whiteboard, marker still in his hand. Moments ago, he had been invisible, the man who swept their floors. Now he had just dismantled the entire report with the confidence of a trained economist. Chief Balogan's deep voice filled the silence. "Mr. Johnson, answer me plainly. What is the projected net present value of this project?" Without hesitation, Akinwale replied, 28 million naira, sir, assuming current exchange rates. But with proper cost management, it can rise to over 30 million. Murmurs spread across the boardroom. Some directors glanced at each other in disbelief. The chief leaned forward, his eyes sharp. "And the internal rate of return?" 23.4%, sir. It is solid, but only if logistics are optimized. If not, it will fall under 21. The room grew still. These were not the words of a janitor. These were the words of a man who had studied, who had mastered the numbers. Chief Balogan tapped the table slowly. "And what risks do you foresee if we proceed?" Akinwale picked up the marker again and drew 3 quick charts. First risk, inflation. If fuel prices rise, transport costs will eat into profit margins. Second, foreign exchange. A shift in the naira-dollar rate will affect import costs. Third, supplier risk. Dependence on one supplier creates vulnerability. The solution is diversification. His words rolled out, smooth, precise, confident. It was as though he had been waiting his entire life for this very moment. When he finished, silence lingered. Even Funke, who already believed in him, felt goosebumps run across her arms. Tunde, sitting stiffly at the table, could not hide his anger. He forced a laugh. "This is a performance, nothing more. Anyone can throw around big words. He is just a janitor trying to impress us." But the chief's eyes remained on Akinwale. "Tell me, Mr. Johnson," he said slowly, "how do you know these things?" Akinwale bowed his head slightly. "I studied economics at the University of Ibadan, sir. I graduated with a good degree. I wrote papers on risk and profitability, but after my father died, life became difficult. I worked odd jobs to support my mother and sister. When this opportunity came, I applied. I missed the interview, but I could not let that end my journey. So I took the janitor's role to at least step inside this building." The confession rippled through the room. Some directors shifted in their seats, ashamed for having ignored him. Chief Balogan's voice softened, though his eyes remained piercing. "So life pushed you down, but you refused to stay down." "Yes, sir," Akinwale said firmly. "I believe destiny may delay, but it cannot be denied." The chief studied him for a long moment. Then he turned sharply to Tunde. "You submitted this report?" "Yes, sir," Tunde stammered. "And you thought I would not notice the weakness? You let arrogance blind you." Tunde's face turned pale. "Sir, I can correct it." "Enough!" thundered the chief. His voice echoed through the boardroom. "I will not entrust my company to mediocrity. From this moment, you are dismissed." Gasps filled the room. Tunde's chair scraped against the floor as he stood, trembling with rage. He glared at Akinwale. "This is not over," he spat, before storming out. The chief turned back to Akinwale. "Mr. Johnson, remove that apron. From today, you are no janitor. You will join this team as an analyst, and this project will be your responsibility." A stunned silence fell again. Then, slowly, hands began to clap. It started with Funke, then spread around the room. Directors nodded in approval, some smiling, others shaking their heads at the irony. Akinwale stood frozen, his heart pounding. Only days ago, he had been mocked for mopping floors. Now, in the same building, he was being lifted into the very role he once dreamed of. Chief Balogun rose to his feet and extended a firm hand. "Nigeria needs men like you. Do not waste this chance." Akinwale shook his hand, his voice steady. "I will not fail you, sir." Outside, the afternoon sun blazed over Lagos, but inside Balogun Holdings, the light seemed to shine directly on Akinwale Johnson. The news spread through the company like wildfire. The janitor had been promoted. Some staff whispered in disbelief, others in admiration. A few scoffed, saying it was only temporary, but by the next morning, Akinwale was no longer carrying a mop. He walked into the office wearing a neatly pressed shirt, tie, and trousers, his first official day as an analyst. Funke watched him from across the department. She remembered how he had stood in the boardroom, explaining numbers with the ease of a lecturer. The memory unsettled her in a way she could not explain. Later that day, she invited him to her office. When he entered, she gestured for him to sit. "Mr. Johnson," she began, "I want to know the truth." "Who are you really?" Akinwale's eyes dropped for a moment before meeting hers again. "I told the chief the truth. I studied economics at the University of Ibadan. My father was a school principal in Oyo State. He believed education was the greatest inheritance he could give me. But after he passed, everything changed." Funke leaned forward, listening intently. "My mother struggled to keep us afloat," Akinwale continued. "I worked small jobs, tutoring, market errands, even construction, to help her and my younger sister. When I graduated, I hoped doors would open. But every interview ended in rejection. They wanted connections, not qualifications." He paused, his voice tightening. "So when I heard about Balogun Holdings, I told myself I must try. Missing that interview nearly broke me. But I thought, even if I cannot sit at the table, at least I can enter the room." His words hung in the air, heavy with dignity. Funke felt a lump rise in her throat. She had grown up differently. Private schools, foreign trips, her father's name opening doors for her. Hearing Akinwale's story humbled her. "You could have given up," she said softly. "I almost did," Akinwale admitted. "But my mother always reminded me, Ore ki ku, kindness never dies." She said that one day my sacrifices would bear fruit. Maybe this is the day she spoke of. For a long moment, silence filled the office. Funke's eyes lingered on him, not as a janitor or even a colleague, but as a man who had fought battles unseen. Then she smiled faintly. "Do you remember me on the street that morning, when my heel broke?" "Yes," he said with a small laugh. "I remember thinking I would ruin my own interview just to help you." "And you did," she replied quietly. "Yet, perhaps that single act changed everything." Their eyes met, and something unspoken passed between them. Just then, a knock broke the silence. A junior staff entered with files for review. The moment shattered, and Funke quickly shifted back to her professional tone.
"Thank you, Mr. Johnson."
"That will be all for now." As Akinwale rose to leave, she added, "And Akinwale, you deserve more than people have given you credit for. Don't forget that." He nodded respectfully and stepped out. Meanwhile, In another corner of the company, Tunde sat fuming in a cafe across the street. He had been dismissed publicly, his pride shattered. His voice shook with anger as he muttered to himself, "That cleaner will not take my place. I will not allow it." His eyes burned with resentment, plotting a way back. Back inside the office, Akinwale returned to his new desk. Colleagues eyed him curiously, some with admiration, others with jealousy. He ignored their stares and buried himself in the files. Numbers came alive under his pen, neat calculations filling the margins. For him, this was not work, it was destiny. As the evening sun slanted through the windows, Funke passed by his desk on her way out. She paused briefly, watching him focused on his work. Her lips curved into the faintest smile. "This man," she whispered to herself, "is not ordinary." Tunde could not sleep. The humiliation of being dismissed from Balogun Holdings gnawed at him like a wound that refused to heal. In every bar and lounge he entered, whispers followed him. That is the man Chief Balogun threw out. His pride, once as tall as Echo Tower, now crumbled under shame. But Tunde was not a man to accept defeat. He began spreading rumors that Akinwale was a fraud, that the so-called janitor had stolen information to impress the chief. At first, a few staff members raised eyebrows, wondering if there was truth in the claim. But as days passed, Akinwale's quiet brilliance silenced doubts. Every analysis he submitted was flawless, every projection clear and detailed. He had the numbers in his bones. Still, Tunde was determined. One morning, he barged into the company, ignoring the security guards shouting behind him. He stormed into the lobby, demanding to see Chief Balogun. "This company has made a mistake," he shouted. "You replaced me with a fraud." The commotion drew a crowd. Staff gathered, whispering.
Funke hurried down from her office.
Her heart pounding. She found Tunde in the center of the lobby, face flushed with rage. "You again?" she said sharply. "You were dismissed. You have no right here." "I will not leave until the chief hears me," Tunde barked. "This janitor deceived all of you. He does not belong in this company." At that very moment, Chief Balogun entered with 2 directors. His presence hushed the entire lobby. He fixed Tunde with a cold stare. "What is this disgrace I am hearing?" Tunde straightened, desperation in his eyes. "Sir, you have been misled. This so-called analyst is nothing but a janitor pretending to know figures." The chief's gaze shifted to Akinwale, who had quietly stepped into the lobby. "Mr. Johnson," he said, "what do you say to this accusation?" Akinwale's voice was steady. "Sir, I do not need to defend myself with words. Allow me to prove myself again, here and now." A murmur swept through the staff. The chief nodded once. "Very well. Let us test you both. If you are the fraud he claims, it will be revealed today." They moved into the boardroom, a crowd following at a distance. On the table lay a fresh set of financial statements from a new project. Chief Balogun pointed at it. "Analyze this. Show me the risks, the returns, and the truth. Whoever fails, let him be known for what he is." Tunde swallowed hard. He stared at the figures, his pen trembling. His lips moved silently as he tried to calculate. But nothing made sense. Sweat pooled at his temples. Then Akinwale stepped forward. Calmly, he drew lines across the paper, separating revenues, costs, and risk variables. He explained each step: the sensitivity to foreign exchange, the break-even point, the adjusted discount rate. He spoke as though the numbers were telling him their secrets. When he finished, he looked up. "Sir, this project has potential, but unless supplier diversification is introduced, it will collapse within 2 years. These numbers do not lie." The boardroom fell into silence. All eyes turned to Tunde, whose page was still blank except for confused scribbles. Chief Balagun rose slowly, his agbada sweeping the floor. His voice thundered across the room. Enough! The truth is clear. One man has wisdom, the other has nothing but arrogance. He turned to Tunde. You are finished. Leave this place and never return. Tunde's face twisted with fury, but there was no strength left in him. He gathered his papers and stumbled out, defeated for the last time. Chief Balagun then faced Akinwale, his tones softened. You have vindicated yourself. From today, you are not only an analyst, you will lead this project team. Applause broke out around the room. Funke's eyes shone with quiet pride. As the sound echoed, Akinwale bowed his head, whispering to himself. Ore kiku. Kindness never dies. The janitor, who had once been mocked, now stood as the man everyone looked up to. The morning sun cast golden streaks over the glass windows of Balagun Holdings. Inside the lobby, staff hurried to their offices, but today their eyes followed one man. The man who had once walked those halls in a janitor's apron, now dressed in a tailored navy suit. Akinwale Johnson adjusted his tie as he stepped into the building. Every stride carried a quiet dignity. Colleagues who once mocked him now nodded in greeting. Some even offered warm smiles. The mop and bucket that once defined him had been replaced by a leather briefcase. His new nameplate, Project Manager, gleamed outside his office. Inside, the desk smelled faintly of polished wood. Files for the upcoming project were neatly stacked, awaiting his review. For a moment, Akinwale sat in silence, remembering his first day here. The whispers, the laughter, the humiliation. Now he sat at the same table where decisions worth millions would be made. By mid-morning, a message came. Chief Balagun wanted to see him. The chairman's office was vast, its walls lined with portraits of African leaders. Chief Balagun rose as Akinwale entered. Sit down, Mr. Johnson. His voice was calm, but carried the weight of authority. You have done well, the chief began. You reminded everyone here that merit is stronger than connection. But let me give you a word of counsel. Remain humble. Pride destroyed Tunde. Let humility preserve you. Akinwale bowed his head. I understand, sir. I will not let you down. The chief studied him for a moment, then allowed a rare smile. Good. Lead this project well, and you will go far. When Akinwale returned to his office, he found Funke waiting at the door. She wore a soft blue dress, her smile bright. Congratulations again, she said warmly. Thank you, he replied, opening the door for her. Though I must confess, I still wake up wondering if all of this is real. Funke laughed lightly. It is real, Akinwale. You earned it. She paused, her tone softening. Do you remember that morning on the street? My broken heel, your interview. How could I forget, he said. I thought I was ruining my future by helping you. But maybe that was the moment destiny chose to open another door. Her eyes lingered on his. That act of kindness told me the kind of man you are. Anyone can impress with words, but character reveals itself in actions. For a moment, silence filled the office, charged with something unspoken. Akinwale felt his heart quicken. He had faced boardrooms without fear, but this moment felt different. Gathering his courage, he said, Funke, may I take you to dinner? Not as colleagues, but as two people whose paths crossed for a reason. Her lips curved into a smile. I was beginning to wonder if you would ever ask. Relief and joy swept over him. He chuckled softly. Then I will hold you to it. Tonight? Tonight, she agreed. As the day wound down, the company gathered in the main hall. Chief Balogan stood at the podium, flanked by directors. His deep voice carried across the room. Today, I present to you the new project manager of this company, Akinwale Johnson. Applause thundered through the hall. Some clapped with genuine admiration, others with quiet awe. Funke's eyes shone with pride as Akinwale stepped forward, bowing slightly to the gathering. Later, as the crowd dispersed, Funke joined him at the entrance. The Lagos evening breeze carried the hum of traffic and distant hawkers calling their wares. She slipped her hand into his. "Ready for that dinner?" she asked with a smile. He nodded, his heart light. For the first time in years, he felt both the weight of destiny and the warmth of companionship. As they walked out together, staff members watched with admiration, whispers of respect following them. With Funke by his side and a new life ahead, he stepped boldly into the night, ready for the beginning of a story only destiny could have written. Kindness never dies. If Akinwale's journey inspired you, show this story some love. Like, comment your favorite moment, and subscribe for more powerful stories every week.